This is Reality Dispatch, written by Jim Mintz.
John's limo ascended the Hollywood Hills. His Monday driver had called in sick the night before. John made a mental note to terminate his employment once the meeting had ceased. This appointment was far too important to have a deviation from routine. The current driver had hit a bump at a speed too aggressive for John's liking. He too would face a termination notice once he had driven John back to Century City. The car pulled into the mansion overlooking Los Angeles. It was a wide stretch of real estate. It was rumored to have once been the site of Houdini's final home and the original site for the Playboy Mansion, both estates long bulldozered to make room for the expansive residence that stretched out before him. The gate had opened upon approach, which John thought was a nice touch. Nolan was the quintessential Hollywood filmmaker of his day, but it was nice to know that his presence was expected among the great ones. When the driver opened the passenger door at the front entrance, the door opened automatically and instructions on where to proceed were broadcast over an intercom. Head straight through, John. I have a game of billiards going in my back sunroom. Yell out if you get lost. It was Nolan's voice directing. He gave instructions offset as clearly and distinctly as he did on. The expanse of the house, notwithstanding, the area Chris had described, was easy to locate. Straight down the path leading towards the three-storied glass windows that overlooked the valley, with the expanse of Los Angeles near the distance, Christopher Nolan was leaning over a billiard table and cracking a triangle right on cue. "Would you care to join me?" he asked, as he hit the jack, cracking the game into play. John proceeded over to the cue stand and retrieved a stick. He checked the tip to see if it required chalking up. Not that he knew anything about the game, nor the requirements associated with the act of chalking up a pool cue. "Your shot," Chris instructed. John leaned over the table and planted a puncture on the jack and watched as it dwindled off course and into a pocket without so much as whistling air across an opposing ball. "Not your game?" Nolan asked. "No, it isn't," John admitted in defeat. He was happy to lose to the master. It would make negotiations more empathetic to his plight if Chris felt in control of the discussion. "I'm more of a golfer," John admitted. "As am I," said Nolan. "I'll have to make another appointment," he suggested. John could detect a hint of desperation in his tone, only slight, but definitely there. "So what brings me up here today on a Monday, Chris?" John asked, not usually one to get to the point, but something in Chris's demeanor caused him to think otherwise. "I'm ready to discuss my next project," Nolan began as he retrieved the jack from the pocket, placed it back down on the table, and hit an opposing ball into another pocket. "A perfect shot. And I wanted to offer you a first look." John walked back over to the cue rack and laid down the stick where he had retrieved it. "You're making me a deal on an empty stomach?" he asked. Nolan leaned over his table to take another shot. He was making a point of not breaking character, not giving a hint of his fear of rejection that was slowly creeping out. "I have an idea that is rather reckless, but necessary for where I am in my career. I do not want to repeat myself, and do not want to reinvent the wheel." He took a shot, but this time, his aim missed. "I know I can take this back to Warner's or have a discussion with Sony. I also have the option to go to Amazon, Apple, or Netflix. I wanted to offer it to you first," he said as he stood up straight. John smirked. He knew Nolan's character had broken. He also knew that the man was lying. He would never do a deal with Netflix for the first release of one of his films on a streaming platform. The man was a celluloid purist. "I'm listening," John said, humoring him. "Look out that window," Chris said, motioning with his eyebrows. John looked towards the expansive valley that looked out to the city. "It is my intention to film a multi-camera IMAX setup pointed directly onto the city from various angles on this property. I plan on filming for approximately 24 months. I will cast no actors and have very little music. I just want to capture the city. I have done the cost analysis with Emma, and the film stock alone for IMAX film will be roughly $87 to $107 million. We want you to give us that money and leave us be. If not, we will take this down the street. But the option is yours first. If you leave this house without telling me your decision, you leave this house without the deal." Nolan leaned over his table and took another shot. This time, 2 balls were pocketed from the single shot. John took a deep breath. He had been stonewalled and intimidated plenty of times in his line of work. He had been threatened and blackmailed, but he had never been given an offer so dirty, so confusing, and so disappointing as the one just presented to him by someone as beloved and as celebrated before. "What is it, April 1st?" he asked in his Brooklyn drawl. "Chris, forget it. You're breaking my balls over here. I can't agree to a $100 million CCTV experiment." "You're nuts," said John. "Film is dying, John. The audience is looking for something new." "I'm not nuts. I'm just ahead of the curve," Nolan replied. "What? You're quoting your old movies now? Get the hell out of here." John took a turn on his heel and headed up the marble stairs towards the front entrance. "I did lie to you," Nolan shouted out after him. "I did offer it to Netflix first," he said. John laughed as he continued his exit. "I know you, Chris. There's no way you did that. You're a purist. Give me a call when you have a real project you want to talk about." He left the house and could not help but notice the Academy Award that had been won 3 decades earlier on the bottom step of the grand staircase. It stood there, lonely and forgotten. John was briefly reminded of the beginning of their relationship and how they had begun their first film, a project that told the life of Robert Oppenheimer, the film that won them these accolades, the ones Nolan had been searching for since the beginning of his film career. John remembered how proud he was at being the one studio head who could deliver this, when all the others could not. The boldness of the pitch Chris had given, and the strict instructions to leave him and his process alone. But this was a different era, and the once great man just could not deliver a return like he used to. What a waste, John thought to himself, as the front door opened on its own, letting in a stream of early, bright Californian sunshine into the hall of the large, empty estate.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.